I'm Jason Oxenhendler, a director with the FedRAMP Advisory Group here at Coalfire. And today I'm joined by two friends, two special guests from StateRAMP. We have the executive director, Leah McGrath, is with us. Leah, nice to see you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Thank you. And Noah Brown, who is doing just about everything you can do for StateRAMP. So Noah, nice to see you as well.
Thanks, Jason.
Yes, nice to have you here. So let's talk about where we are. 2 months ago, we made, StateRAMP made an announcement that here we are, we're ready. What has the reception been like since making that announcement a few months ago?
I would say the response has been extremely positive and by and large exceeded our expectations, which has been a lot of fun. If you've heard any of our webinars or presentations in the past, you've heard me say that the first quarter of this year has really been about evangelizing StateRAMP and trying to knock on doors and let people know that we're out here. We just launched in January. And so, in the first 3 months of the year, we talked to over 1,500 people in briefings and presentations and have just had a great response to it. J.R. Sloan, who is the president of our board, and he's also the chief information officer for the state of Arizona, has said a few times, I think it's the right solution at the right time. So we're seeing a lot of good response to this idea of standardizing cloud security for states and local governments, as well as the providers who serve them.
So it seemed like social media blew up with StateRAMP. I know on LinkedIn, there were quite a number of hits. Why do you think it's taken such the hold that it has?
Well, it's funny you say that about LinkedIn, and I'm going to take a moment to apologize to any of the messages I have not responded to. I definitely saw that happen as well, and lots of private messages coming, and tried to do our best to keep up. But, I think it's really that there hasn't been a solution or everyone recognizes the problem. States and local governments are under attack when it comes to cybersecurity. They're all individually working on how to manage third-party risk and how to do that efficiently and effectively with the limitations that come with budget and bandwidth. And so states and local governments are grappling with this question at the same time that the cloud service provider community is saying, hang on, we don't want one-off procurement requirements and different processes in every state and local government. And so I think there's been this recognition between information security offices that, hey, this needs to happen. We've got to start verifying our cloud security and manage third-party risk better. And then your procurement offices in states and local governments who say, yep, we need to do this, but there hasn't been, a solution that kind of brings those together. And I think StateRAMP, I've called a few times, StateRAMP is the bridge between information security and procurement. It's the bridge, the connector between government and providers. And so I think it's kind of been that missing link. I can't tell you the number of people that we've talked to, whether it's providers or other state and local government officials will get on a call and talk about StateRAMP. And at the end of the call, they'll say, we've been saying for a while, we need something like StateRAMP. So I think that's why you're seeing such interest.
Well, it seems like StateRAMP is kind of herding in all the cats, where everything has been the wild, wild west in terms of state and local government and IT security and procurement.
Yes.
And it's like putting everything into one pot and saying, here's how it's going to work. So let's talk a little bit about that. You guys have a great website. What's the latest? Where are things with the program right now? Where do things stand? When are things kicking off? Tell us everything. We want to know.
So we just started opening up membership for government individuals and officials last week, actually. So in mid-April, started inviting the individuals who work for state and local government and public education institutions as well to join. And so as of today, April 29th, we've got representatives who are members from state government, local government, higher ed that include representing 25 states, about 20 local government kind of municipalities and large counties. and a dozen or so higher ed institutions. That number is growing, so even as I'm saying that, it's probably outdated.
Okay.
So that has been really fun as we invite, government to really kind of put their name on this and participate. We are planning to begin accepting membership from providers to join. So we have different membership categories. One is for government, one is for the provider community. And so provider membership will open probably here in the next week or two, early to mid-May. And that will coincide, I'll kick it over to Noah here in a moment, but that's going to coincide with the publication of some of our security templates and documents. So Noah, if you want to talk about maybe where we are in that process, it's been very exciting to work.
Noah's been busy at the keyboard
been
with
busy.
spending a lot of time with Microsoft Word, right, Noah?
Absolutely. And Excel and the various others. So yeah, so building out all of the SSP requirements, doing some shifts on how SSPs are normally done, and trying to make them as CSP, 3PAO, and state friendly as we can. So we've actually completed the first round of the templates. Those have been brought to the Standards and Technical Committee for StateRAMP. We just had our review of those just yesterday. So in the next week, the plan is to conduct a final review after edits, and then those would be published to the community after that.
Great.
And I want to just say a thank you, Jason, to you and our steering committee members and all of our members of our Standards and Technical and Appeals Committee who've been so helpful in reviewing the documents to help us, I think, launch. We know this is version 1. We're going to learn a lot through this process, and I'm sure iterate and improve as we go. But, our goal has been to at least launch with the kind of our best foot forward. And I think because of your input and help and so many others, we're going to do just that.
And the many calls to talk about controls, Jason.
That's right. That's right. I just full transparency. I am a member of the Standards and Technical Committee, so I've been working with StateRAMP for a year, as have many others in the IT security field. Let's talk a little bit. What documents can we expect to be published within the next couple of weeks? I know there's some documents out there on StateRAMP.org right now. If you haven't gone to that website, check out StateRAMP.org. If you want to be a StateRAMP accredited 3PAO, go there as well. What documents are going to be on the horizon, Noah?
So we've done the review, and the documents that will be coming out will be, the SSP is actually broken up. Sections 1 through 12 would be a Word document template that would include your general information about the system that's being audited. And then we have a separate document, which would be the StateRAMP Controls matrix, and that has some automation in it to help assist CSPs track where they're at throughout the process, as well as the Readiness Assessment Report, the RAR, the Security Assessment Report, or SAR. We'll have a configuration management plan, an incident response plan, a continuous monitoring plan template, contingency plan template, the rules of behavior document, as well as 17 policies and 17 procedures. The idea being that we do as much work as we can in the documentation templates to try to make this process easier on some of these CSPs that are stepping into StateRAMP is kind of their first experience really going through a formalized audit process.
Got it. Got it. And one of the things that's different, a lot of people are always asking about the differences between FedRAMP and StateRAMP. And we were just talking about this yesterday, and there's quite a number, and too many to probably list on a podcast right at this moment. But the one major difference I see is in how continuous monitoring is going to be done with the StateRAMP PMO versus how the FedRAMP PMO has their level of involvement. So what is going to be different about the way StateRAMP does continuous monitoring?
So from the PMO's perspective with StateRAMP, there's an issue with some of the states having big struggle we heard from the states going through the steering committee was the personnel, the time, the amount of work it takes to review all of those security audit findings. So centric to the PMO's role in StateRAMP is that the PMO is actually reviewing that continuous monitoring. They're reviewing that documentation. They're reviewing the RAR and the SAR reports. And they are actually conducting that review and providing feedback, not only to the CSP, but to the state as well, to try to help alleviate some of the burden that is continuous monitoring on the state side, and trying to make sure that requirements from the state, if there are changes to requirements or there's something that needs to be done, the PMO is that central conduit to get that information to the CSP community as well.
And I think that centralized program management office for providers is a real benefit, right? Because it's that centralized office that you're working with. So you're providing continuous monitoring reporting one place instead of having to provide it 50 different times. So it's streamlining the process from the provider perspective and also ensuring that it's being done in a secure fashion.
Right. So one of the other big issues that we've seen and heard a lot about, I'm going to say the R word, reciprocity between FedRAMP and StateRAMP. So
I call it something different now.
What do you call it now?
I call it the FedRAMP fast track.
Okay, well, do explain the FedRAMP fast track, please. Inquiring minds want to know.
There you go. Well, we found that reciprocity was just the wrong word to use because it does imply it's a two-way track. It's not. And it was implying, I think, too often that it was automatic, and it is not. So we're doing a little pivot as we've had more conversations with service providers who have FedRAMP authorizations, and just as we continue to learn more, which is why I started calling it as of this week, Jason. So it's still very new.
Okay.
The FedRAMP fast track, and so, Noah can talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but at a high level, if you are a provider who has an offering that already is FedRAMP ready, has a FedRAMP, ATO or PATO, then you're eligible for this FedRAMP fast track. It's a fast track because there's not a new audit required, but you do have to work with the PMO to ensure that documentation is usable. So I'll turn it over to Noah to go from there.
Sure. So one of the requirements we really want to make sure, and we've heard it from states, is that seeing that full security authorization package, if I'm a state CISO and I have data for my citizens that has to go into somebody's cloud provider or a cloud provider service, I want to know the security status of that system. So one of the things we've talked through is rather than requiring another audit, you'd actually get on a call with the PMO, letting us know you're wanting to utilize the FedRAMP fast track. We would go through and watch you pull that information down out of your repository. And if another issue we'd heard from some CSPs is working with federal agencies, there might be information that needs to be redacted. So the key part is that the PMO has a chain of custody, and we can say, yes, this is the same information that you were audited against. Remove the information that's necessarily protected by a federal agency, and then taking that documentation, conducting a review, as well as also providing your CONMON reporting and your POAM reporting that you do with FedRAMP. Same templates, same information brought over, and all that would be housed in the StateRAMP PMO repository. And then we have that information as a state looks to adopt a system. We can provide them access to that system once the CSP has approved their access to it.
So what I think is great about StateRAMP, one of the things that's great about StateRAMP is it's really bringing a level of IT security, responsibility, and accountability that really didn't exist before, did it?
Correct.
And certainly not in a standardized or uniform way. What we've heard from providers and from states and local governments is sometimes it was just procurement specific, which means that you would have one-off procurement requirements. The RFPs are not as consistent across the board within a state, let alone between states or local governments. And so, what this does is it provides, I think, a framework that allows for standardization in RFPs, for more consistency in the ability to reduce that friction in procurement that can happen. But also on the security side, the ability for an information security officer for a state or a local government to have visibility into the cyber posture of the providers with whom they're working and to make those risk-based decisions that are right for them. It's the visibility in an ongoing basis that, is just really difficult and without a framework like StateRAMP to achieve.
This program is also a help to state agencies that don't necessarily have the financial resources or the human resources to handle,
Yeah.
maintaining a very strict security posture. Has
Sure.
there been any concern from the states that, how are we supposed to do this, or what has the states been saying?
I haven't heard a concern about how to do it. I think there's more enthusiasm that there's a way to do it.
Great.
I think there's been an acknowledgement among the security officials that this needs to happen, but like I said, limitations of budget and bandwidth, or just finding talent to hire to be able to do it is a real burden and challenge that most agencies and organizations face.
Has
And I
it
think,
been, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think from a state's perspective, it's moving away from, during contract negotiations and such, you no longer have that provider just doing a self-attestation. And when we talk about, talent in the community, now you have a group that is setting that standardized set of controls and requirements. You have the 3PAO community who is providing that talent and providing that security check. And then you can take it a step further away from self-attestation or from a third-party audit. Now you also have the continuous monitoring, which is huge.
Yes,
You're
I
not
think
just
that
getting
is.
a point in time reference of where the system
Right.
is.
Well, the funny thing is everybody, CSPs, we work with, and it's definitely a celebratory moment when you receive your authorization to operate, regardless of who it's from. But I always joke that that's not the end. It's just the beginning, because
Absolutely.
you've gotten to the finish line, but you got to keep running that race to keep the system, metaphorically speaking, you've got to keep running that race. This is just the beginning, because now the maintenance piece kicks in.
Right.
But the maintenance piece should always be there when you're thinking about cybersecurity, right? Because most CSPs or technology companies are living in an agile or working in an agile environment, and they're making continuous improvements to their offering, adding features, adding systems. So I think, that shift of culture or mindset around cybersecurity has to be moving toward continuous monitoring and continuous improvement.
Do you see a shift in the mindset? Has that
Yeah.
change in culture begun?
I think so, and I can tell you when we've talked to 44 states now, as we're having these conversations and more local governments, I think there's a spectrum, right, of cybersecurity, just maturity for an organization. And, where we started from a policy perspective for state and local government 10 years ago might have been, or maybe a little longer than that actually, would have been around, hey, I got to secure my systems. And then there was this question of on-prem or cloud or hybrid, and how do you do that in a safe way? But it was still really focused on, I got to secure my own infrastructure. Then we shifted to, now I got to train the employees, make sure they know how to, don't respond to a phishing email, don't open it, and what to do. There's this third leg of the stool that is, how do you manage third-party risk that is inherent when you're working with a lot of different suppliers? And so where I see kind of the mind shift or the culture shift happening is that awareness level around how to manage third-party risk. And some are really trying to do it now, and some are just trying to figure out how to begin. So wherever you are on that spectrum, I think StateRAMP helps. And then that continuous monitoring is a part of it. And the continuous monitoring shift, I think, has really begun because of SolarWinds.
You guys have a plethora of documentation up there as of this recording, one of which is the continuous monitoring documentation. When you put a program together like this, or when FedRAMP was created, it's always a crapshoot. You never know if it's going to happen, or if you're going to end up without a program after a year or two
Right.
working. knock on wood, so far everything has worked out great, and the next couple of months are going to be really key for StateRAMP. Where do you guys see this in about 3 years to 5 years? Where do you see this going?
I know my thoughts. Noah, do you want to start?
Yeah, mine are more technically
Okay.
inclined on this one.
That's probably
specifically
true.
around controls. I know from my perspective, just some of these calls, and this wasn't really a focus for me originally. Obviously, going NIST 853 and that control set, but talking to some of these states and hearing the requirements they have, talking about CMMC or CGIS, IRS 1075, some of these other control requirements. My long-term goal would be able to see if you're approaching StateRAMP and you have you have your SOC 2 or you have one of these other certifications, my ideal state would be StateRAMP is able to crosswalk all those controls and set a standard for them, especially for some of the provider community dealing with the CGIS requirements that states have to interpret state to state. Trying to come up with a set baseline for everyone in a crosswalked framework that'll allow us to bring in some of these providers and allow a StateRAMP authorization to mean more than the NIST side. It allows you to have an understanding of where you're at across all these different frameworks. And if you are a StateRAMP authorized provider and you're going with, you're winning a contract in a new state and they have the CGIS requirement, you know exactly what controls or additional things you need to implement to meet their requirements. Really just being the map or the matrix, so to speak, for these providers for the states and getting a unified framework in place, depending on what type of business you do and what type of system you're using in that state.
So not only will you be losing your marbles from Microsoft Word, you'll be losing it from Microsoft Excel also, because trying
Absolutely.
to create those crosswalks among all those frameworks will get you every time. Leah?
So Noah really stole my thunder, but I would have said it in a less technical way. We started with verifying cloud security based on NIST 800-53 Rev 4, now Rev 5, because that's where there was the most shared commonality between states and local governments in terms of, their adoption of a cybersecurity framework. But there is huge need, huge opportunity to help. And this is where I get really excited to help states and local governments and the providers come together around a standardized or uniform approach for CGIS, for IRS, for the MARSI 2.0, if you get into the medical or healthcare compliance.
CMS.
So CMS, exactly. So there's I get very excited about the framework we've created with StateRAMP, just organizationally as a nonprofit, bringing members in, having these committees. I think we have the framework that will be required to bring people together around a common set of standards so that, Noah, you can do the crosswalk, right? So that's what I get excited about is, I see this as we're at version 1 and we're going to learn a lot and we're going to iterate, but then I hope we go, okay, what's next?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
This is it's a constant in progress, work in progress all the time. You don't just say, okay, here's the framework, goodbye.
Right.
And I'd also like to call out that Jason will be actively involved with those Excel spreadsheets as well, being on the standards and technical committee.
I heard the commitment.
That's fine by me. I'm happy to help. We're winding down on time here. Two questions before we go. Obviously, StateRAMP we know is based on NIST 853 revision 4. Are there any plans in the works once the revision 5 controls for FedRAMP are released, and are there any plans to incorporate OSCAL at the moment?
I can speak to Rev 5. No, I'll let you talk to OSCAL. Those are two very commonly asked questions. So on our Standards and Technical Committee, Jason sits on that committee, but it's chaired by Dan Lorman, who is a former CISO for the state of Michigan and now a security mentor. And our vice chair is Maria Thompson, and she is the chief risk officer for the state of North Carolina. And I know that one of their priorities this year is to evaluate Rev 5 and make recommendations for policy adoption to the board as to when and how to incorporate those controls into the security requirements for StateRAMP. And then in regards to OSCAL, Noah.
So kind of the focus has been getting off the ground and having these templates available for CSPs, right? So I definitely think OSCAL is going to be in our future, no matter what. Talking to some of these larger CSPs out there, you know, the AWSs, the Microsofts of the world, they absolutely want OSCAL. And OSCAL is definitely a route we're going to have to go. And that'll be part of something with the Standards and Technical Committee we'll work through. Part of the reciprocity process right now with providing that FedRAMP document.
FedRAMP fast track process.
FedRAMP
fast track.
Shame.
Right. Part of the FedRAMP fast track process, providing that documentation, it gets the larger CSPs, those providers that are really want OSCAL in the door. And then it also allows we still have the documentation sets available for the smaller CSPs. But I think realistically, over the next year, the Standards and Technical Committee is going to have to really focus on developing an OSCAL version of the controls and make those available for these providers as well.
Guys, this was so much fun. This was the fastest half hour of my day. It was a pleasure chatting with you, Leah. And Noah, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Always good to talk with you guys.
It's great talking with you, Jason.
Too.